moving image record in this 100-year history of moving images has largely been created by, people outside of our own communities. Here is where there is a real record of how life was lived, how we became American, and how all of this process happened. We're inviting selected filmmakers to develop new work from the films collected through this initiative. And tonight's screening is the first of that series. So without further ado, Mark Decina.
Hello and welcome. This is the first program to use the Memories to Light archive, and a first for me to present material that is so personal. Hopefully my parents will talk to me after this, but what the hell. When Stephen Gong first asked me to come onto the project, create a trailer, and be a part of the archive, my first thought was, sweet, a way to get our home movies digitized for free. I'm a bit of a cheap bastard indie filmmaker, so free is always a compelling notion. But as I started to see the footage that was in the archive, and then for my own family's home movies that I hadn't seen in over 30 years, it started to hit me that, wow, this is powerful. The home movie movement was a short window in the history of media, and hard to fathom today with every smartphone being a digital video camera that allows us to shoot hours upon hours of footage of every mundane thing we do. I think Andy Warhol, with his 24-hour movies of the Empire State Building, might have been prescient to our current media-saturated culture. Who is going to watch this shit? But with film cameras, it was expensive and it was cumbersome. Gratitude was delayed because you had to expose, develop, and then screen the films. It was an occasion to look at them, and most likely only occasions that the cameras came out. The other phenomenon was that the clips tended to be short. When I started looking at the archive, the idea of breadcrumbs came to me, because that's what most of them were, small morsels of the past, most without sound, but filled with the soundtrack in your head. Figments of memories that flooded back the smells, tastes, and sudden clarity that years of life experience, blurred like layers of gauze. For me, it was like finding a home that I had forgotten or didn't know that I was looking for. It also inspired or reignited ideas I floated in my head for a while, stemming from being Asian and seeing celluloid proof of that. There I am, a little Asian kid. Kind of strange to say, but there's no denying it. I was Asian since I was a baby. But more importantly, it was a reminder of being a mix that was very unlikely. During my life, a person who was of Japanese and Filipino descent was rare. Historically, there was good reason for that. Thus, the title of my presentation, The War Inside. As a bit of history, Japan, on its imperialistic binge, invaded the Philippines a few days after Pearl Harbor. In a holy war with China for years, the Philippines was a natural extension. Amid the gallant resistant movements, and before General MacArthur's promised return, horrible atrocities occurred, the Bataan Death March being top of mind. When the war ended, an estimated 1 million Filipinos died. But less than 7 years after the surrender of Japan and the liberation of the Philippines, love blinded two young people who saw beyond their respective countries' past. My mom, Chieko Muto, was born in 1929 in Japan. The middle child between her older brother and younger sister, her parents both died when she was 11 years old, 3 months apart. The imperialistic war came back to haunt Japan, and the nightly air raids finally claimed my mom's home. With the exception of a few photographs, they lost everything. Wooden paper houses don't stand up well to firebombs. With her parents gone and her brother and his new wife adopting her and her sister, her family managed to stay together through the occupation and reconstruction of the country. My dad, Louis Decena, was born in the Philippines in 1930. His parents also died when he was young. His mom passed, giving birth to his youngest brother. He and his siblings were raised by a reluctant uncle and an abusive aunt, until he was put into an orphanage. He had another uncle lie about his age, and at the first opportunity he got, he jumped a ship as a merchant marine. At 16, he was a waiter in the mess hall for the troops coming back to the States after World War II. When he got to the U.S. on October 7, 1946, and assumed the address of another uncle and aunt in Hayward, he was ironically registered for the draft and found himself in the U.S. Army Infantry, headed to the Korean War. Funny how it didn't matter if you were a citizen back then, we would send anyone to war. But getting back to their meeting, my dad contracted pneumonia in Korea and was medevaced to Tokyo. My mom, working at Esso Oil at the time, was spotted by my dad and pushed friends of friends for an introduction. My mom was reluctant, but my dad, in my mom's words, was very persistent. Within 4 months, they were engaged. I would say that is persistent. Hello? Invasion? 1 million people killed, Bataan Death March? How can this be good? Regardless, my brother Pete was born a year later in Tokyo. My dad was relocated to various bases in the U.S., and my brother Paul was born in 1956 while my dad attended language school in Monterey. Whether he knew it or not, he was being groomed for covert operations. And then, while my dad was stationed in the Panama Canal Zone, I came into the fray. They seemed like happy times as far as you can tell, with the exception of my brother Paul throwing a few tantrums. Ironically, he is the calmest of us all. Who says you are who you are at birth? I'd never seen this footage, my mom and dad kissing. Despite my brothers trying to be in the love moment, behind the scenes, things were not going so well. For many reasons that went beyond my own cultural spin, the marriage was failing. In talks later with my mom, my dad was afflicted by a seemingly universal tenet, but especially prevalent in men. Persistence to get what you want, until it is that you get it. From relationships to ham radios, he was on to other things. The internal war was on. My mom, despite having family support in Japan, decided to move 3 boys, aged 6 to 11, to California. Partly as from losing face in a failed marriage in 1960s Japan. Divorce was unheard of. Partly she didn't want the judgment from her brother, my Uncle Tom, who was against the marriage in the first place. And partly was my mom's knowledge that being raised in Japan was not an easy way to go. Cultural mores, militant schooling regimens, inherent racism. We weren't purebred Japanese after all. It was her call that raising 3 boys by herself would be easier in America. From the day we landed in Fremont, California, we became Asian Americans. Truthfully, I grew up with almost no overt cultural identity once we got to the States. Much to my chagrin today, for not knowing how to speak another language, it was my mom's decision to not teach us Japanese. Her goal was to have us fit in, not stand out. Give no reason to get ostracized for speaking with an accent. Her name was massacred by her coworkers at Fairchild Semiconductor, till she finally gave up on Chieko, which means 1,000 blessings in Japanese, and was simply known as Chick. My mom, the Chick. I could see that. She was a pretty hot chick. Sorry, Mom. I'm stereotyping here, but is it really stereotyping when you're talking about yourself? I grew up with a kind of internal schizophrenia. On one hand, I was driven, competitive, a perfectionist. Some might say an imperialistic Japanese. But I also, unfortunately, was the nice guy, which didn't work out that well with getting girlfriends. I had a very laid-back nature, native and indigenous. Some might say it was my Filipino side. I joked that my Japanese side would force my Filipino side on death marches to get good grades and excel at school, because what I really wanted to do was party. My mom raised us, but didn't force Japanese culture on us. She was more subversive, infusing us with the biggest cultural shaper of all, food. It was just part of growing up to eat ochazuke for breakfast, sukiyaki for dinner, and being forced to wake up early on New Year's Day to eat mochi and ozoni. That's not easy after alcohol and New Year's Eve parties came into my life. Sure, Mom, 10 a.m. isn't too early on New Year's Day. No problem. I coped by embracing my Japanese side. I held on to that cultural identity more Japanese than Filipino all through my years, even after my dad moved back to the States when I was 14. Within the first 5 minutes of seeing him again, after 8 years of very little contact, my brothers and I found out that he actually had another family with another Japanese woman, who were soon to join him. Was he single-handedly trying to heal the wounds of two cultures previously at war? What the hell? In fairness to him, it was a part of an assumed identity for a covert CIA operation called the Phoenix Program. I have since read, in Stanley Karno's book on the Vietnam War, that the secret infiltration and assassination program crippled the Viet Cong. My dad said he was encouraged to fully blend in by his superior officers, including getting a girlfriend. You might say, 2 kids later, that the assumed identity thing went too far, but who knows? The U.S. Army has ordered worse things in the name of national security. Regardless, I think I only processed the math later and realized that his other kids were overlapping the time he's with my mom. I blame my dad for a lot of things. The way I saw it, I was who I was because of Mom, who came to California with 3 boys, found a job, bought a house, cooked dinner for us every night, took us on vacations, put us through college and launched us in life. How could we not cherish her? Maybe that partly fueled the war with my Filipino side. I was a racist against half of who I was. The Filipinos I knew all talked funny. They were too nice. They had every job at airport security and baggage check. That wasn't me. Clearly, I saw myself as a Panamanian freedom fighter. Not that my dad didn't try to make up for lost time, but that's hard to do. He had a family of his own. We were busy. Life went on. My brothers and I are all doing fine. No felons, no drug addicts, and my mom did incredibly well, remarried and widowed, but is still having a great life. I have to say I've been in peace talks with my internal war for a while now. I of course have had warm and loving times with Filipino friends, always centered around food and family. Lumpia, pancit, and of course, adobo. Yum. It's also because I'm getting older. My dad is getting older. He's had a harder life than me, so I'm loath to pass judgment, even though I have. I've been married to my wife Liz for 25 years, and no, marriage is not always easy. We're strong, but nothing melts judgment like empathy. Joining 2 completely different cultures is a challenge. Our kids, Maggie and Lucas, are not only Japanese and Filipino, but from Liz's side, Irish and Italian. 4 island cultures wrapped into one body. Wow. Watch out. The irony of ironies, our son Lucas has joined a Filipino fraternity. He knows more about the culture than I do, and he's proud of it. It blows my mind. And it goes without saying that Manny Pacquiao has reinvigorated the term Pinoy pride. I admit I'm a complete latecomer and hanger-on, but man is he exciting to watch. I did a proposal for an ITVS program that showcases short films on the imagined near future. The series is called Future States, and the working title for my piece was The End of Racism. It was about the last 2 purebred individuals of the Chinese and Swedish race who fall in love and are about to get married. As word gets out, they get deluged by purist protests. Both countries' heads of state try to block the marriage on cultural preservationist grounds. In the end, love rules out, and the final intermingling of race occurs. One more reason for hatred, conquest, and war has been crossed off the list. What's next? In that light, I challenge that CAM's Memories to Light Asian American Home Movie Archive will also cross that point. When my kids are asked to submit their family's home movies, they'll submit their Grandpa Lupino's and Grandma Beggy's films. I envision the archive collection to be more Hapa than purebred Asian. So yes, I'm embracing my Filipino side, forgiving my dad, and perhaps coming to peace with myself. Could that be the first step in the key to the world coming to peace with itself? Here's to that future. Cheers.
This is the world-famous photographer shooting world-famous kids.
thought I'd just ask you that. No, that's nice.
Next, we have the zero gravity cliffhanger that I got for Christmas. And boy, is it huge. Next, we have money. We got this super holler twin pack, whatever.
I just want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you for all the lovely, lovely things and all the terrific friends. I hope that safe delivery.
I hope the cakes taste good. I'm sure it will.